Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro reaffirmed his support for dialogue and diplomacy as means of building understanding between Venezuela and the United States. More than 12,000 artisanal miners from various departments in Peru marched to the Congress of the Republic to demand the expansion of the comprehensive mining formalization registry. Gaza authorities reported that the Tel Aviv regime has only allowed 60 trucks carrying medicines to enter since the start of the truce. Hello and welcome to From the South, from the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba. My name is Pablo Micheliche. We begin with the news. Stay with us. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro reaffirmed his support for dialogue and diplomacy as means of building understanding between Venezuela and the United States. Venezuela's head of state, Nicolas Maduro, declared that the most powerful thing a leader can have is his word, in reference to the statements made by the President of the United States, Donald Trump, in which he considered holding talks with the leader of the Bolivarian nation. He also reaffirmed Venezuela's position of absolute respect for international law and his condemnation of the use of force to impose rules. The Venezuelan president also emphasized that it is only through dialogue that points of mutual interest should be sought.
I believe that the most powerful thing that a true political leader can have is the word. And the written word is there forever. You can see in this letter that I have here, Caracas, September 6th of 2025. This letter was delivered of 3 pages to the President of the U.S. on September the 6th. September, October, November, 9 weeks exactly it was delivered, and Venezuela has a position that hasn't changed of absolute respect to international law. We firmly question the threat of the use of force or the use of force to impose wars in the relationships between countries, and we ratify what is said by the UN Charter, what is said by our Constitution, what is said by our people. We ratify that only through diplomacy the free countries should understand themselves, the governments, and only through dialogue should they look for common points in subjects of interest to both parties.
In this sense, President Nicolas Maduro reiterated that in the face of the lies of the U.S. government, the Venezuelan people will not be silenced and will continue to defend their truth.
Accuse us of total lies which are extravagant when the own organisms of U.S. intelligence for many years have affirmed the contrary to the lies that they say of Venezuela. We're not going to be silenced. This country will continue saying its truth in the streets, in the international forums, in the UN, in social media, in the communication media.
And in the United States, amid threats and military operations, President Donald Trump once again mentioned a possible dialogue with the Venezuelan government. The U.S. president has changed his tone towards Venezuela in a context of strong pressure in the Caribbean. Trump stated that he could have discussions with his Venezuelan counterpart, Nicolas Maduro. However, this action is accompanied by the military deployment of the U.S. South Command, which is maintaining its operations near the Venezuelan coast under the rhetoric of the fight against drug trafficking, with the use of the aircraft carrier USS Gerald R. Ford, one of the world's largest war machines, in a clear strategy of intimidation and encirclement against the South American nation. In this sense, during his statements, Trump did not rule out the possibility of a military invasion of the Bolivarian Republic and emphasized that the only thing to do is the deal with Venezuela. Local media in Trinidad and Tobago reported that the country's defense forces were not informed when the U.S. Marines arrived. This came after the government of Puerto España had allowed the United States to conduct military exercises off its coast. High-ranking military sources who spoke on condition of anonymity to the local media outlet Guardian Media revealed the lack of coordination. They explained that they learned of the exercises through a press conference and not through official channels, which they described as unusual. This lack of planning prevents the proper selection of personnel and logistical management, such as the approval of weapons and ammunition. The foreign military presence and the conduct of joint exercises without transparent coordination raises questions about the defense protocols and sovereignty of the Caribbean country, as well as being a clear violation of international law and a threat to the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean. Regarding the military deployment of the United States in the Caribbean, the former Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Keith Rowley, announced the actions of the current Prime Minister of the country and referred to the fact that U.S. congressmen themselves consider what is happening in the region to be illegal.
At a later date, when Washington has a more aggressive posture to Venezuela, and rather than be more careful, be cognizant of how we manage ourselves before, look at our vulnerabilities. We have a Bajan Prime Minister who doesn't go to work, doesn't talk to the media, don't care who she fire, don't care who gets a job, but she bad. And America is going to break international law according to American analysis from American parliamentarians, senators, and congressmen. They are the ones arguing now about whether their country is following international law. We listen to them. It's now 6 weeks that we have been in this situation where the United States representatives are making statements about what their government is doing because it does not make sense to them, and their determination is that these actions are illegal.
The former Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Keith Rowley, stated that there is no information available to the world that shows that Venezuela is a major source of cocaine or a major transshipment point.
All the information available to the world, to us as members of the United Nations, on the drug trade, does not tell us that Venezuela is a major source of cocaine or a major transshipment point. And they've told us where those sources are and where the major transshipment is. And we do know for a fact that we do have effects in Trinidad and Tobago from the drug trade. Nobody's saying no. But that does not permit us to jettison the rule of law, nor encourage any other country so to do.
Also, Rowley asked the government of Trinidad and Tobago if it knew the consequences of its decision to lend its territory for the U.S. military operation in the Caribbean.
I want to ask the government of Trinidad and Tobago, that is the backup to this. Did you know that this was to be the outcome of the decisions that you made with the United States? Did you make any decision with them? Did they share any information with you about this operation, which involves nuclear submarine, thousands of Marines, assault capacity for a threatened neighbor, aircraft of leading edge technology, and of course, most importantly, the use of Trinidad and Tobago as a staging ground for this operation? Did you know that? Did you agree to that? Or is it just happening and unfolding that today the Venezuelans could be saying that we are using our country to facilitate an attack on Venezuela?
Rowley also blamed the government of Trinidad and Tobago if the current crisis leads to a confrontation between Venezuela and the United States.
If tomorrow there is a confrontation between Venezuela and the United States, and Trinidad and Tobago is seen to be a participant, big or small, it is entirely as a result of decisions taken and actions taken by the government of Trinidad and Tobago under the UNC, under the leadership of Kamala Persad-Bissessar. And I want to make that abundantly clear.
And now we have a short break coming up, but first remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates and much more. We will be right back, stay with us. Welcome back. More than 12,000 artisanal miners from various departments in Peru marched to the Congress of the Republic to demand the expansion of the comprehensive mining formalization registry. During the protest, the miners defended their right to work and demanded that Congress pass legislation in favor of their formalization. It should be noted that artisanal miners will not be able to work without the extension of this permit, which is valid until December 31st. They emphasized that the main demand is the reinstatement of nearly 50,000 artisanal miners excluded from formalization by the Ministry of Energy and Mines. For its part, the drafting of the law for small and medium-sized mining in the country is expected to be finalized. In Ecuador, the popular consultation and referendum promoted by the government of Daniel Noboa took place amid multiple complaints from citizens, analysts, and representatives of various movements, as the questions will not benefit the country. As a result, at the end of the election day, the victory of the no vote on all 4 questions was positioned as an irreversible trend, evidence of the people's total rejection of the government. Let's see more.
At 6:20 a.m. on Sunday, November 19th, Ecuador began the election day for the 2025 popular consultation and referendum, following an opening ceremony at the National Electoral Council. Then, at 7 a.m., the polling stations opened. From the very beginning, citizens expressed their rejection of the government's initiative.
No in my case, no in my family's case. I hope that the country and the world realize that no is the virtue for this country.
Like Chalita, thousands of citizens joined in voting against the referendum, stating that the government's offers are lies disguised as promises.
Because he has not fulfilled the promises he made in his first presidential election campaign. He promised not to raise gas prices, to supply hospitals with medicines, and he has not delivered on any of that 4 times over. And if I could vote more, I would vote more.
At 5 p.m., the polls closed and the vote count began. Immediately, the rejection of the executive branch was reflected, with the no vote prevailing in all 4 questions. The people said no to the return of foreign bases, no to the reduction of assembly members, no to the withdrawal of funds from political parties, and no to the Constituent Assembly.
We are celebrating because there is hope for our country, and we will continue to work together in a coordinated manner to defend our great common project, which is the Constitution.
This is a clear message that Ecuador has sent you: stop the arrogance, stop the abuse of power. Now is the time to change your direction, to manage and work for the benefit of the Ecuadorian people.
Subsequently, the president of the Citizens' Revolution Movement, Luisa González, stated that today marks a new chapter in Ecuador's history. She added that this result reflects a people tired of the actions of the executive branch, which only works in favor of the elites.
And Noboa says no. This country is a dignified nation. A new history is being written where Ecuador says no to those who lie to us and deceive us, to those who want to pit us against each other and seek personal gain. Ecuador says that here we seek the common good because we are a brotherhood of people.
Ecuador le dice aquí buscamos lo colectivo, porque somos un pueblo hermanos.
Immediately, the streets turned into a festive atmosphere. González even joined in singing with the supporters who were celebrating the victory of the no. Hundreds of citizens shouted and applauded with flags in hand and horns, both in the streets of Quito and at the RC campaign headquarters.
y en la sede de campaña de la RC.
Sí podemos construir un Ecuador
Yes, we can build a different Ecuador when one governs with knowledge, the capacity to love the people, and not only love for their own pockets. Today Ecuador said no to the corruption of Progan, to the splitting up of our hospitals, to destroying public education and health, in order to turn them into private businesses.
y la salud pública por llevarla para sus negocios privados.
For now, the victory of the no in the popular consultation and referendum is a fact, and citizens celebrated in the streets with chants. For several analysts, this is a sign that the government should step aside and accept the rejection of the Ecuadorian people.
Con cámara de Francisco Guayasamín, Gabriela Mena, teleSUR Ecuador.
In an interview with teleSUR, former Ecuadorian President Rafael Correa claimed that President Daniel Noboa manipulated his government plan with lies and deception, which could lead to a recall of his mandate.
Noboa will be supported tooth and nails by the oligarchy, the military leadership, certain religious leaders, and obviously the United States. But a government that didn't have that support, because it had a puppet at its head, would be very weak, and our constitution allows for the recall of mandates. It would be very difficult with Noboa because he has the powers that be, the media, economic powers to which he is linked. However, this weakens him greatly. It would be healthy to remove him from office because he is a complete fraud, a complete liar, a disaster of a government, and that is precisely why the Constitution includes the provision for removal from office, and we shouldn't have to suffer for years. It's a government that is a democratic fraud, not only because it stole the elections, but because in a democracy, people don't vote for someone because of their names or faces, but because of a government plan, and if they betray their government plan, that is also fraud, and obviously Noboa lied about his government plan.
The former president warned that Ecuador has lost its state of law due to the government of Noboa's failure to comply with the constitution.
In Ecuador there is no rule of law. It was lost a long time ago. They do whatever they want. I used to hear that they were accused of authoritarianism. Well, authoritarianism is not only illegal, it is also unpopular. Here there are illegalities, constitutional breaches, persecution, violations of human rights, open fraud, the appointment of prosecutors at will, the destruction of parliamentary procedures, and all these abuses. Maybe they will be a little more limited after the tremendous beating that the Ecuadorian people give them.
In response to the U.S. military deployment in the Caribbean, Rafael Correa highlighted the Ecuadorian people's response in rejecting Noboa's proposal in the national referendum on installing military bases in Ecuador.
Of course, and by a wide margin, he lost that question. The military base was in the city of Manta for 10 years, and Noboa proposed moving it to Salinas, where it was demolished. That question and the other questions were a little closer, but the military bases were overwhelmingly voted no, because people understand perfectly well that it is an attack on sovereignty. That thing that these young people who talk about the new country is really a country with Botox. They think these are concepts from the past. Sovereignty is essential to be independent, with a life of dignity, of that sovereignty, of being your own masters, not being a colony of anyone, and the people, the young people, understood this perfectly, and that is the rejection it received at the ballot box, in addition to the contradictions.
And we have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English. There you will be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage, and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final break, don't go away. Welcome back. Authorities in Gaza reported that the Tel Aviv regime has only allowed 60 trucks carrying medicines to enter since the start of the truce. The director of the Ministry of Health in Gaza, Munir al-Barash, denounced Israel for breaching the ceasefire agreement, while the World Health Organization warned that at least 4,000 children require immediate medical attention in order to survive. The truce agreement stipulated that 600 trucks per day would enter Gaza with humanitarian aid. However, the current average is only 171 vehicles, less than a third of what was agreed. International organizations reiterated their call to allow immediate access for humanitarian aid to prevent further death, as the health emergency in Gaza reflects a critical situation. If not resolved, the situation could lead to a humanitarian catastrophe of major proportions in the region. In other news, Chinese government condemns approval of new U.S. arms sale to Taiwan province. The deal was valued at $330 million. Through its Ministry of Defense, Beijing expressed a strong opposition and warned that the maneuver seriously undermines its sovereignty and national security. The military package approved by the U.S. State Department mainly includes non-standard parts for aircraft and repair services. Although Washington does not consider it offensive weaponry, China interprets it as support for the island's separatist forces. The Chinese Ministry of Defense urged the United States to immediately stop the sale of weapons and cease all military contact with Taipei, warning that otherwise bilateral relations and stability in the region will suffer serious consequences. At COP30 in Belém, urban social movements are advocating the right to dignified housing as a way of fighting environmental racism. Our correspondent Brian Muir has more.
The People's Climate Summit has ended, but hundreds of the social movement activists who participated in it have stayed in Belém to participate in the COP30 and dozens of parallel events around the city. Brazil's National People's Housing Movement, or UNMP, is occupying debates and seminars to talk about the relation between dignified housing and environmental justice.
Today, the state of Pará has the fourth highest percentage of favelas in Brazil. Our struggle is a daily affair. I'm a woman from the housing movement, and I've lived in a favela for 36 years that has no land deeds. And we know that the people who suffer the most in these territories are women, mainly black women and single mothers.
Studies show that residents of favelas, like those in Belém's Vila da Barca, a wooden shack community on stilts over the Amazon River which is home to thousands of people, are 7 times more likely to be hospitalized for diseases that are exacerbated by climate change, like mosquito-borne illnesses, due to lack of adequate sewage treatment. Furthermore, the precarious nature of favela housing leaves its residents more vulnerable to climate change-related super weather events.
Working class housing in city centers is good for the environment because people don't have to go back and forth from the periphery to their jobs in a commute that generates a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. Furthermore, adequate housing guarantees that its residents are better prepared to face extreme weather events like floods. Therefore, the housing issue is of central importance when we talk about climate and environmental justice.
The United Nations Climate Change Conference will continue until November 21st. Brian Muir, teleSUR, Belém.
And we have come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And you can also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. We have a small video before finalizing about the power of unite in unison in Venezuela.